And then as soon as I go to holster, he turns around and charges me. I was like, yeah, I didn't know anything about it, man. I was at the hospital. And all I want to do is like, just get the out of the locker room. And I got in my car, dude, and I cried and I cried and I cried.
Welcome back to Internal Affairs, a police podcast here, the host, your IA guy. Today's guest is going to be Eric Tansey. He's the host of Failure to Stop podcast. I got to know Eric through my little journey of podcasting, and I got to tell you, he's got a story to tell about his termination that involved internal affairs back in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's a story you can't miss. We're going to have a great conversation, and stay tuned. It's going to be a good one. See you soon. Okay, here we are, Code 6 with Eric Tansey. What's going on, brother?
Hey, how you doing, Marlon?
I'm doing great, man. Hey, first and foremost, what's North Carolina? What's the weather like over there? Just out of curiosity.
91 degrees today was the high.
Okay, all right. I know you. You know, it's. I always ask because you just never know, man. Sometimes I think of the East Coast like being so cold, and we're at 90 degrees over here, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's been like 86 to 90, pretty much like the last 2 weeks.
Cool. Hey, brother, you know what? Again, thanks for showing up. I had the pleasure to come on your podcast not too long ago, and we met, through this journey of podcasting. I do know you're a host of the Failure to Stop podcast, and I appreciate you inviting me to do that. Look, internal affairs is a very touchy subject. You could agree. It's something that we don't talk about much, right? It's a bit taboo. So I kind of want to know, just right off the bat, when you saw that we were beginning an internal affairs podcast, what was your first thoughts, bro? Just curious.
I did a pretty good job staying away from internal affairs pretty much my whole career up until the very end of my career. But I mean, I pretty much avoided internal affairs like they were the plague, you know what I mean? So I don't know. Definitely just scary, right?
Right.
You know, I don't know. Like, even if you got called to internal affairs and you didn't do anything wrong, which I can remember the first time I went to internal affairs, I was a basket case, man. I was freaking. I was a rookie, and I was freaking out, man. I was driving up there shaking. I was trembling on the way to internal affairs. I couldn't think of a single thing I had done wrong because I had been so scared of doing something wrong on training that I can't imagine what I could possibly be having to go to internal affairs for. And it was crazy. And then when I got there and I did get in trouble, and it was like for something I had no idea I was going to be in trouble for, it was a heartbreaker. And I just, from that moment forward, I was like, they're the enemy. That's the bad guy. And I'll just do everything to thwart internal affairs the rest of my career. But I mean, I really just kind of stayed away from internal affairs. I never really had to go back, but I thought it was really, really crappy what they did to me as a rookie. And, yeah, so that was my first, didn't see it coming, had no idea what I did was even wrong. And, definitely didn't think that there was a punishment warranted for it.
Right.
But I guess they saw it the other way. And the crazy thing is like, this happened on like my third or fourth day on training where I wasn't even doing like, I was like a robot.
Yeah.
You know, I was
totally
being controlled by an FTO. Like,
yeah.
It was crazy. But yeah, that was my first experience with internal affairs.
Thank you for sharing that, because let me ask you this. Do you think we do a disservice to Academy?
Yeah. Well, I don't guess every internal affairs would be different, right? I don't know. I can only go off of ours. So.
Right. But let me ask you this, though. When you were in the Academy, you know, we call that what, an academy, recruit, if you will, for the lack of better words. Did anyone come in and tell you anything about internal affairs? Because you just got done explaining your first experience with internal affairs. I'm just wondering to know what was IA? What did they tell you about IA before that experience? When you got to your department in Raleigh PD?
Yeah. So for like Raleigh PD is the capital city of North Carolina.
Okay.
And it's an accredited agency.
Okay.
So the standards to get in are really, really high. standards. So when I went to the academy, most everybody was a college graduate except like 3 of us. And I went to the academy with 56 recruits, and there was 3 of us that weren't college educated, but all 3 of us were military. And so the standards were like super, super high. Everybody in my class could be nicknamed professor. You know what I mean? They were like that nerdy of a class. It just seemed like everybody was so smart. And midway through the academy, internal affairs came in and pulled 3 recruits out. And it was like, what is going on? And they got hemmed up for something. And I don't really remember what it was. It was something to do with a taxi driver made a complaint on them over a weekend. They were like intoxicated, and the taxi cab driver was taking them to the wrong location. And they kind of like refused to pay the taxi driver because he like took them in a longer direct, something like that. And they ended up firing 2 of the 3 and starting the 3rd one from the beginning.
Okay.
And so like, that was like, whoa. And that was it. That was all we saw of internal affairs at that point in the academy. But I think at the end of the academy, when they fired those 3, they gave us like a brief statement, like, hey, if you're wondering, they got fired, and, we don't tolerate any drinking related incidents. And, of course, when you're in the academy, you're just head down, right?
Of course.
So like, I didn't talk to those people. I didn't know. I never knew the totality of the story, but no, I don't remember in the academy ever being told what IA did or does. I just know that we were all scared of them, right?
That's right. That's all. You know what? I keep asking that. It's just every guest that I have thus far has told me, there's no there's just no presentation. We don't know what their functions are, et cetera, et cetera. That's an incident that actually happened in your academy class. Yeah. Interesting you say that, because in LAPD, when I went in the academy in July of 1998, I want to say like in the 2nd or 3rd day, the instructors come in and they like start yelling like, we know you guys did something. You know who you are. And if you don't come forward and tell us exactly what happened when you took money or I totally forgot what it was.
Right.
But it was what you would consider an integrity check, if you will.
Right.
Thinking that, hey, I think it was on the 2nd day, like, you better come clean and you better say something, because if you don't, you're going to get fired. And they scared the shit out of us to the point where I do recall, I think we had one classmate the very next day, he didn't show up. So they got to 1 out of 70 of us. But that's not internal affairs in the sense that, hey, what is the functions of IA? Because you can agree, considering you went through an IA that we'll talk about a little later, that there is this misconception about what they actually do. Would that be fair to say?
I mean, I don't think it's a misconception of what they do. Like, I think I understand exactly what they do, especially from my perspective. And because we're an accredited agency, like, you have to be and they have to nitpick, right? So we have just an all-star cast of police officers, all doing the right thing, all just, everybody's boots are shined, everybody's physically fit, everybody's going to the gym before work. Right. And it just seems like IA was nitpicky. They couldn't, they had to, like, I guess, show that there was a need for IA. And so they would just kind of do these crazy audits and go down these crazy rabbit holes. Yeah. And then just, try to come up with something. And it was very rare in the 7.5, 7 3/4 years that I worked in the Raleigh Police Department that I ever saw somebody somebody got what they deserved, right? Like, it was always like, I cannot believe they effed over that dude so bad for something so tiny. But, it was all about the accreditation of the department. We don't want to lose our accreditation. We don't want to lose. So, I knew very clear what the standard was, and I knew what IA, I knew when I got in trouble, by the way, when I was a recruit in training, I had a hit and run. And as a recruit, we went to the apartment complex, local apartment complex. And I noticed that this car had like matching damage or whatever. And I ran this whole investigation kind of by myself. where my training officer was like, okay, what do you do now? And I was like, well, I'm going to go to the front office and I'm going to see whose car it is. And,
Right.
and we went through this whole ordeal, and it was raining and it was cold, and we knocked on this door, and this naked man, who I won't say his name, but I'll never forget his name. But anyway, naked. This was my probably like first real arrest, like really like a significant arrest. And he was butt naked, and his wife and child were there with him in this apartment. But he opens the door like completely naked because he had ran from the cops and was muddy. And anyway, it was like this big deal. And then he tried to like shut the door. And so we pulled him outside and we sat him down. And it was cold and raining. And so we did a drive-by. But when she drove through the parking lot, I had my phone on FaceTime.
Okay.
Because we didn't want her to get up out of the car and walk all the way up these stairs with this violent guy and this woman who was like periodically opening the door. And I think she threw like a coffee mug or two, and we were going to deal with that later. It wasn't a coffee mug, but it was like a cup, and we were going to deal with that later. And so I just thought like, okay, well, critical thinking here. She could drive through the parking lot, and I'll hold the FaceTime camera up, and she could say like yay or nay, or I can't tell because I can't see. And then we would try to do it anyway, because it was so raining and it was freezing cold. It was like sleet rain. Well, 3 months later, I'm just about to graduate, and I get called into IA for that.
Wow.
And, of course I totally forgotten. And they were just like, what phone did you use? And they just made this huge deal about it. And I ended up being like written up, and I ran up for like a policy violation because that's not how you do a lineup, or that's not how you do a drive, the drive. I had seen other cops do, where the victim will drive by and say like, yeah, that's him. So like, I didn't see any difference in me using my FaceTime camera, and she's physically there. It's not like I FaceTimed her from like Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, like Correct. She was physically in the parking lot. I just thought it was like a really good idea to keep her safe. And instead of like being like, okay, well, we see what you did there, you just can't do it, and here's why, let's not do it again. I would have been like, dude, lesson learned. Like, I don't ever want to come back. But instead, they give me this paperwork, and they make me sign the paperwork, and and then they give you like, we don't know what your punishment's going to be. We're not here to dictate a punishment. We're just going to find you guilty of this, and we have to send this to a DA because they might throw the case out. And it was just like this whole ordeal over a hit and run. And I was like, man, okay, I get it. I'm not thinking outside the box or doing anything like this ever again. Screw internal affairs. They hate me. Yeah. And that was it. So I kind of knew, that's kind of where IA sat.
Right.
What many misconceptions?
Yeah. You know what, to your point, definitely from your lens, there is no misconceptions. I can tell you just from experience, having worked not just internal affairs, and in LAPD, we have the luxury to have worked officer rep section, which is actually defending cops. So I had a chance to work both sides. And I can tell you from my lens, the misconception comes to mind when people think that, hey, you know what? They're out to get us. They are the rat squad. Don't talk to those people. And again, I'm taking you back decades, and decades have existed where we're just so evil, and it's the dark side. And it's pretty dark, right? Because no one really knows who you are until you get in trouble. Mm-hmm. I get all that. However, in my experience, the misconception comes when you try to be very neutral, transparent, honest, when you are assigned a complaint to investigate all this misconduct, but yet, not all the time, but sometimes it becomes personal, and you do it for self-serving reasons, and you don't make it about the process, and you make it about yourself, all because I just don't like Eric, or I don't like Marlon, or whatever the case may be. And you know what? That just sucks, because it shouldn't be that way. And that was one of several reasons why I decided to start this podcast. And I was also wondering, what I wanted to ask you in the beginning is, when you did meet me, or you saw that banner, or you saw something like Internal Affairs A Police Podcast, what went through your mind? Like, what is this guy? Who is this guy? Or what is he doing?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I would give it a shot, but like at the same time, it's like I don't know. Like I'll never, like, I don't think I'll ever trust anybody from internal affairs, like wholeheartedly trust them. Like I always, like, especially since my experience of getting fired, like everything they did, there was an angle. and you didn't know, like everything they did was an angle. So it didn't behoove you to tell them the truth,
Right.
you know, because the truth was going to kill you no matter what. They were going to manipulate the truth into whatever they want the truth to be.
Got it.
And it doesn't matter if you tell them the whole truth, and it doesn't matter if you hear, like they know what they're going to do. They're going to do it. And what they want to do is just prod you and torture you into it. And it's like, hey, I'm giving you all the answers.
Yeah.
Like, let's just do this. Like, I'm giving you what you want to know, but they draw it out. And, you know, yeah. And when, I guess when we get into my case, you'll kind of see where I'm coming from, but it's like, you don't have to sneak pictures of me doing what I told you I'm going to do. You could call me and I'll just give you pictures, or I'll just tell you I'm there. Like, all right, Eric, are you at this location? Yes, I am. I've never lied to you before. Why? So you don't have to send an undercover car to come and snap your pictures. I mean, if you think I'm lying to you, go ahead. But you know I'm not lying to you. And you know I'm telling you, yeah, I'm physically where you told me not to be. And I'll tell you that 1,000 times over because I feel like I should be able to be here. Yeah. And I'm going to continue to be here. And if you want to fire me, I get it. That's fine. But, you know, it's, you know, there's so many stories that of internal affairs. Now, when I got to my squad, they were cleaning house of some nefarious characters that, you know, we were told were nefarious and they were these bad guys. And then one ends up, now one is ahead of, I don't know, some kind of union or Teamsters or something. And I've gotten to know his story more, but back in the day, I really just didn't like him because I thought he was a dirtbag, and come to find out he wasn't a dirtbag at all. It's just that the city, there was a bad allegation out against them, and the city just didn't want to deal with it. And so instead of dealing with that allegation, and I didn't believe that at the time until I physically saw it myself happen to me. Like when I went from officer of the year to just like the most evil, bad cop, you know, we're going to go through hundreds of hours of your body camera audit only to find you swearing one time. And then we're going to just throw the book at you and all the things that they did to me. I was like, man, I can't, they probably did that to that Teamsters guy. He probably wasn't the monster they made him out to be.
So much to unpack.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm glad we got to that. But before we actually hear what happened, man, talk to me. 2011, you went in the academy, and I know you said about 7 3/4 you lasted in Raleigh Police Department. Anything that sticks out? I know you were a street cop for a while. I know you said you worked special projects.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I loved it enough to write an entire book about my career. I came out of special operations in the military with a couple of combat deployments, and I got thrown right into this crazy mix of humans on the Southeast District, which is the inner city side of Raleigh. And I mean, it was just a rock star squad, absolute best of the best. They all went on to be K9, SWAT. Everybody that I served with, one became a lawyer. Nice. One became SWAT. One is now like on some DEA task force. One is K9. One is homicide detective, which is like the hardest job to get. Right. And, you know, so they're all these just, and then 3 of them formed their own super secret special squad that they started at our squad level, which is all in my book. And I get thrown in there, and it's like, they didn't want me there at all to begin with. And they were just like, you know, they had their thing going, and I came in as a rookie. They hadn't had a rookie in like 2 years because there was a hiring freeze back then. And so I'm like the first rookie, and because of my background, my special operations background, the sergeant just throws me right in with these like hard charging dudes. And these guys were not field training officers. Wow. And they were just kind of like, keep up, stay out of the way. And I messed up everything, man. I wanted to fit in with these guys so bad that everything I did was wrong. It's like jujitsu. If you try to do jujitsu, you will fail at jujitsu. It's when you just relax and let jujitsu happen that you'll begin to flow and to feel people out and to be able to shift momentums and to see things that you didn't see before. But when you physically try, you have these like blinders on. And so that's what I did. My career was very tumultuous at the beginning. I mean, just an example, they would do morning breakfast on Sundays as a squad, sergeant included. And there was this high profile warrant on this Sunday that they wanted to get. And they were like, if he's in the city, he's going to probably, he's in the city because we've seen a picture that he posted on social media. So we know he's around. Maybe he'll stop by mom's house on Sunday. We're going to do breakfast and then we're going to figure out where this guy is at. And by end of shift, you know, we're going to catch this guy. So while they went to breakfast, I was like, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be proactive and I'm going to go and I'm going to start knocking off the list of where he's not.
Okay.
And then that way, when they get done with breakfast, I can be like, hey guys, I already figured out where he's not at. And so I drive by mom's house. There's no cars in the driveway. So I'm like, cool. He's definitely not here. So I'm going to just go up, knock on the door, ask mom, and then she's going to say no. And I'm going to check this blocks. Now it's like 7 a.m. So I knock on the door and this like 25-year-old girl opens the door and I'm like, I'm just going to make up a name, but I'm like, hi, Officer Tansey, Raleigh Police Department. Is Marcus here by chance? And she's like, what he do? And I was like, just some traffic violations. You know, this is like violent felony, firearm by felon. Like this is like number 9 on our top 10 list for the week. And so I'm like, just some like minor traffic violations. I guess he missed court or something like that. I'm just trying to verify if he's here, if he's not here, and let him know that, you know, he missed a court date. We can either go down to the magistrate, work it out or whatever. And she's like, I was like, are you Marcus's mother? I know she's not his mother because she's 25.
Right.
And she's like, yeah, I'm his mother. And I'm like, oh no. And I was like, well, is he here? And she looks back and then she looks forward and you know that look, right?
Of
like,
course.
He's there.
Yep.
And she's like, no. And I'm like, great. But in the moment, I was like, surely she's going to say yes. And then I'm going to back way out of this.
Right.
And I'm going to call in for the Geek Squad and we're going to, you know, do work on this. So I was like, well, can I walk through and just make sure he's not here? And then I'll check this off the list and we'll remove this address. You are the mother, right? You reside here. I'm giving her every opportunity to just like give me an excuse not to go in this house. And she's like, yeah, I'm the mother and you can come in. I'm like, oh, great.
No. Wow.
And I'm a rookie, you know, I'm just off field training, trying to make it. And so I enter this home and there's a long hallway of all closed doors. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just going to open each door and then shut it. And then I'm going to back out and I'm going to call the guys and I'm going to tell them everything. And then I'm going to just keep eyes on this from a couple of houses down. And I'm going to get the out of here. I'm never going to do this again. I start going down the hallway, just literally opening and shutting the doors. I'm not even looking. I don't want to see this guy. I open like the second or third door and he's trying to crawl out the window of the house. And so I run in, I grab him by his dreads and I sling him under the, I sling him, it was a bunk bed and I sling him and he goes through the bunk bed and I'm chasing him through the bunk bed. The woman comes in, she tackles me around the waist. You know, I'm trying to mush her face off and hold on to his belt buckle. It's just all out mayhem in this very small room. I get on the radio, I scream, Raleigh, help me. I need help. I don't say where I'm at. I never got out on the radio where I was at because it was originally just a drive-by. Just a drive-by. I was just driving by. I end up getting in this heinous fight. I pepper spray her. This other woman comes in the room who I don't even know if we ever caught her. I think I sprayed her. Well, I know I sprayed her, but I think when I sprayed her, I think she ran out the back door and who knows where she went. But all out mayhem, right? So fighting 2 women and this guy, and we end up throwing punches, and it's just a big mess. And they're like, Raleigh, I need to know where you're at. You know, 424, where are you? Da, 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 da. And so finally I get the guy in handcuffs, and I've got the other woman like pinned down to the floor by her dreads, and I grab the radio, and I'm like, I'm at whatever this guy's name is, his house. That's all I knew. I didn't know an address. Right. I couldn't remember the street. So I'm like at Marcus Bono's house. So by the time the whole squad gets there, I've got both of them outside, both of them in handcuffs. My eyes are screaming from all the pepper spray in the small room, but my chest is held high. I'm like, whoa, I did it. And they were so mad at me. They were like, they were like, you're off of the squad. You're out of here. Sarge, Sarge was like, go back to the station. And I was just like, oh no. And so, yeah, that was just an example of just everything I did was this massive black cloud of failure. Now that didn't go to internal affairs or anything, but
of course,
it was just a very hard first year until I got adopted by like the K-9 officer. He just sat me down and I thought it was them firing. Like I thought I was getting fired maybe, but they sat me down for dinner. It was like an intervention and they were like, look, dude, like we've got you, but like you gotta just stop. Like you gotta just stop. And my excuse at the time was, yeah, but you guys have never you guys never really like like you expected me to just perform, and I
Correct.
don't know how to do the job. So
Yeah.
it was very fun career, very fun. But the first year, I didn't know. I just remember just telling my wife, like, I don't know what to do. I don't like everything I do. I fuck up. Everything is a foot chase. Everything is a car chase. I can't even stop a car without it just being absolute mayhem. I don't know how to talk to these people because I'd never been in a ghetto. I'd never been in a hood in my whole life.
Got it.
And that culture is, if you don't know how to talk to them, if you don't know how to understand them, it's very strange, right?
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah, it can be very, very challenging, man. I appreciate you sharing there. That's what the hell are you doing, Eric?
Dude, they were so mad. I, it was, not, and I ruined lunch and dinner, but
on a
yeah,
Sunday
by
morning,
the time I finished, by the time I was like 3 or 4 years in, they made me like a field training officer, and I became a senior officer. And, things started clicking really fast. It's just my learning curve was way below the average, but I climbed higher than everybody else. So like everybody started here, but kind of gradually climbed.
Right.
I started way down here and like skyrocketed, but it took me a while to catch up, and that was difficult. But even though all that crazy stuff happened, crazy things, lots of forces, everything, I never had to go to internal affairs.
Yeah, no.
Like I never did anything wrong. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was just stupid.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the wrong. Walk me through your your IA story. I know it was an off-duty incident, right? You owned and operated a business, and I'll take it from there. Go ahead.
While I was a cop, I got in a pretty significant. I got in a car chase that led to the suspect hitting my partner head on with his motor vehicle, crossed 4 lanes of traffic and hit her. She was pulled over waiting for the chase to pass by, and she was going to do a U-turn and get into the chase. And he went 4 lanes over and hit her at 57 miles an hour. And his pickup truck went up over the hood into the glass. And at that moment, I knew she was dead. Like I was like, there's no way that she just survived a Ford F-150 to the face.
Okay.
And so in my brain, she was dead. I got out of the car. The dude jumps down out of his truck onto the hood of the car, comes off of the concrete, and I got him at gunpoint. I tell him to turn around, and he does. And I tell him to walk back to me, and he does. And then as soon as I go to holster, he turns around and charges me. And so I pull my gun back out, and I catch him, and I'm just like, don't shoot this guy. And we're wrestling, we're tumbling, and I go to hip throw him, but my foot stays one way, and my torso and him go the other way.
Okay.
And I hear like pow, pow, pow. And I'm like, I just sent 4 rounds down Pool Road. I just shot my gun off like 4 times. Like, I'm screwed. We get to the ground, and all I'm thinking is, where are my shell casings? I don't know why, but that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, this huge pain shoots up through my leg, into my groin. I'm like, I shot myself in the wiener, even though I knew there's no possible way I could have shot myself in the dick because my arm was way up over his head. Come to find out, there was no round shot, period, at all. It was my leg snapping in various places. So my leg broke in 4 places. I get 12 screws, 2 pins, a plate, and a rod. Basically from the ankle all the way up through the knee, just everything kind of blown out.
Okay.
And and so I end up having to go on, obviously leave for like 4 or 5 months. And while I'm there, I enroll myself in the Gallo Wine Academy. I'm a huge wine nerd. And I go after the coveted certified specialist of wine diploma, which at the time was like a 70% fail rate for the first time testers. So it's a very difficult test, 2.5 years of just intense study. I go and I take the test. Later on in life, I become a sommelier and a certified specialist of wine. And I knew beverage was going to be my thing. So about year 5 into the police department, I had met a lawyer, and we were going to open up a distillery in a different town and a different county altogether.
Okay.
And the policy at the time was you could not own a bar and you could not sell or distribute alcohol. But there wasn't anything in the policy that said you could not manufacture alcohol. And the way the state of North Carolina runs is you don't sell the alcohol anyway. The state sells it. So there's no possible way that I could sell to anybody underage or sell to somebody who's intoxicated because I can't sell it. It has to be sold from the Alcohol Beverage Commission.
Okay.
So, I run it through the off-duty guys. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Like, what should I do? And it takes 2 years to get the license minimum, because it takes about a year to get the federal license, and then it takes a year to get the state license.
Okay.
In that time, you have to have a building. You have to have these stills. Everything has to be inspected. You have to give like 3D imaging, like of the distillery. It's crazy. It's a crazy amount of work. So I go on this 2-year journey and I get it cleared by off duty, and my sergeant starts to help out after work. Like they're coming by to help me bang nails because I built this place from the ground up. Got this old cotton mill that was built in the late 1890s, 1903, I think is when it was completed. And so like there was just a lot of work to be done. Everything had to be gutted out of the inside and redone, and all these cops and even a captain came by and helped bang nails. This one sergeant built my entire bar for me, the tasting bar area. It was great. So I did that, and everything was good and gravy, and everything was going to be good. And about 2 days before the grand opening, the soft opening, I get in a foot chase with this character, and I catch him, and I'm laying in the mud, and my phone's like buzzing in my pocket over and over and over again. It won't stop. Even if I click it to turn it off, it keeps buzzing. So I'm figuring, okay, I must have tackled, like it was part of a bank robbery too. So I'm like, I bet you this is the detective. So I go to answer my phone while I'm sitting on top of this dude covered in mud, and it's the city manager. And she's like, hey, we need you at the city manager's office. And really at that time, I didn't even know where the city manager's office was. But I knew this was kind of coming because that whole 6 months leading up to the soft opening, they had audited me. They had just ran me through a rigmarole for 6 months, like crazy stuff. We can go into it if you want to, but it was wild. Like it was wild. Got it. And so I knew something was coming, but like even my sergeants and my captain was like, dude, they're not going to do anything to you. They're just trying to get you to quit. They just want you to quit because they don't want to deal with this. So just don't quit. Like just take it on the chin. This will pass. So I go to the city manager's office, who I didn't even know at the time. And it was the assistant city manager that was there. And she was like, we hear you're opening up and I'm covered in mud because I just got this foot chase.
Wow.
So she's like, we hear you're opening up a distillery. And I was like, yes, ma'am. But the soft opening is this weekend, but I will invite you guys to the grand opening. No problem. Blah, blah, blah. She's like, why didn't you clear this with the city manager? And I was like, well, I cleared it with my lieutenant, who cleared it with my captain, who cleared it with the off-duty sergeant, who cleared it with the off-duty captain. We've read the policy. There's nothing in the policy that says you can't manufacture alcohol. I just can't sell it and I can't distribute it. But in the state of North Carolina, we don't distribute or sell alcohol in the state. Everything gets manufactured and then it gets shipped to one warehouse in the state. Doesn't matter where you're at in the state. It all goes to one warehouse and it gets distributed from our alcohol law enforcement in North Carolina. So I never do any of the distribution. So it's just a man, and we're in a different county. And I was like, the city councilman owns a brewery in the city of Raleigh. So I figured, why can't a cop outside of the county own a distillery where we're not going to do any tastings or anything? It's just like manufacturing facility at the time. And she was like, no, that's not okay. Like, and I was like, well, what's the policy I'm breaking? And she was like, you need to resign. And I was like, excuse me? And she's like, you need to resign. And I was like, when? She was like, today, before this weekend. And I was like, well, what's my other option? She's like, you'll be fired. And I was like, just like that? And I was like, there's no like question of the policy. Like, I know that I've cleared this with everybody. She was like, no. And I was like, okay, well, I've never been fired from a job before, so let's go that route. And she was like, okay. And then she's like, you can leave. And I was like, yes, ma'am. I was like, super nice. I left and went and sat in Sarge's office. And he was like, dude, they're not going to fire you. Like, they haven't fired anybody in like 20 years. They're not going to fire you. So we called the union guy, and the union guy's like, bro, they would be crazy to fire you. You're not going to get fired. Don't quit. They're just trying to get you to quit. Blah, blah. And I did the soft opening on that weekend. And then on that Tuesday, I was called into internal affairs, and that's when the real horse and pony show started.
Wow.
And then, yeah, it was crazy. My internal affairs was insanity.
What were the allegations?
Well, what ended up happening, like, it ended up in the end being unbecoming of an officer.
Okay.
And the paragraph that I'll never that I've memorized is the values of a police officer do not coincide with the values of a distillery owner.
Okay.
And so that was unbecoming of an officer. And then they gave me some policy violations along the way.
Right.
Because internal affairs at the time was being extremely obnoxious.
Yeah.
And I knew it was over at that point. And so I was being kind of obnoxious back, and they were hitting me on every policy violation that I did from that point forward with them. And
yeah, and out of experience, I don't think the policy violations played a big role. I think you're right. The unbecoming conduct is what we call CUBO, right? Conduct unbecoming an officer. Just to set some light into that particular allegation, because I try, or I should say we, my partner and I, we have a California post-certified course of internal affairs. Day 1, day 2 is your officer-involved shooting investigation is day 2. And we try to do a good job to teach these sergeants, at least day 1 when I'm up, teaching about what a CUBO is. There is barely a couple of cases that will kind of define what a unbecoming conduct type of incident that would be. And I got to tell you, man, you sharing this particular story, and I get it. I understand you starting your own business. You've had a chance to reflect on that. My question to you is, if your business was something other than a distillery, do you still think you would have went through all this?
I think no. I don't think so. And to be honest with you, this would have gone so different had the internal affairs investigator not been such an asshole.
Okay.
I had a smile on my face this entire time because I loved being a street cop, and I loved being in Southeast Raleigh. When it came time for promotion, my Sarge called me in and was like, yo, it is time. You have to put in for something.
Okay.
I don't care if it's field training officer. I don't care what it is, but you got to put in for, there's got to be something else you want to do. You can't just ride the street in this shitty area your whole career. And I was like, well, right now that's what I want to do.
Right.
And so he was like, I'm putting you in for FTO, whether you like it or not, and you're going to go for it, because I loved being a cop. I loved my neighborhood. I was a good beat manager. It was like, I felt by year 5, I felt like I know what I'm doing and I'm good at this. I can talk to the public. I can talk my way out of anything. No fights. I've had a gun in my face and didn't kill the guy. I mean, I had it all, and I didn't want to lose that. And, by year 6, I was one of the best field training officers that I think my Sarge would have attested to, that I was one of the best. I never failed a single rookie. And, it ended up being that when a rookie was going to fail, they sent him to me as a last ditch effort, and I would get them right up to speed really fast, because I believed in playing to their strengths and making them, I felt that like you could be a good cop if you had confidence, but if you don't have confidence in yourself, you cannot be a good cop. And so trying to stress these recruits out and putting them on calls that they're not comfortable with, sometimes it's, they just got to get back to the basics on what they're comfortable with, and then you work that. So I had a really good rapport. Like, I had a good thing going with training recruits, and the recruits kind of liked me, and and I was building a pretty good reputation for myself. I got put on a special assignment against my will, but they were like, dude, you got to do this, like, and you should love it. You can be fun. And I was like, no, I'm going to not be on my beat. And the special project was fun. I was looking for guns and drugs and illegal food stamps and things like that. And we did a lot of undercover work and a lot of work with informants. I got to work with informant, learn a lot about that. But I really just wanted to go back to my beat. And I knew that they were just trying to get me to put in for some promotion or something, trying to force me out of something I didn't want to do. So I had a smile on my face. I love Raleigh PD. I still to this day love Raleigh PD. I think it's a very good agency. And so when I went into internal affairs, I really was going in there with this like open hand of kindness. Like, this is crazy. They're trying to fire me. Like, what can we do about this? Like, what kind of discussion can we have? And I told my wife that I was going to resign if we couldn't figure it out.
Okay.
We couldn't figure it out. I was going to resign. That's what I went in on that Tuesday to accomplish. When I got to internal affairs, again, I'm officer of the year at that point currently. He knife hands me. I've never met this dude in my whole life. His name was like Lieutenant Williams. Never met him in my life. And he goes, what were you told on such and such date? He had the date nailed down. And when that knife hand came out, I was like, I just looked at him. I said, sir, I have not done anything morally wrong, ethically wrong, or legally wrong. This is a policy, a question of policy that I think we could discuss as gentlemen. And he lost his mind.
Wow.
And I did not see it coming. I thought that this, you know, because I was such a good talker. I'm always a good talker. It's my podcast for a living. I thought that it was going to work. And he lost it. He was like, you're not going to sit here and dictate to me how I'm going to run my investigation. Is that clear with you? Is that clear with you, Officer Tansey? And I was like, oh, this is something much more than what I thought it was. And I was like, okay. And I was like, you know what? And then that's when I just went full asshole. I was like, I'm not doing any of this. I was like, you just tell me what I did wrong. I'll sign your paperwork, whatever it is that you want to do, but I'm not going to talk to you. And then he and I went back and forth, and some captains got involved. And every 2 weeks, man, I had to go back for the same shit with this guy. And it ended up coming to him wanting all my equipment out of my car, which was fine, but he wanted me to sign a consent to search my car. I said, I'm not giving you consent to search my car, but you can go into my trunk and you can get the shotgun out of the trunk, but I've already given you everything else that the department, you know, requires me to give you. So there's nothing else in there that you need. And he was like, well, it doesn't work that way. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not giving you consent to search my car. That's stupid, you know? And he was super mad about that, but I thought that was unreasonable.
Right.
So they got the captains involved again, and they're like, well, can we go get the shotgun? I was like, 100% you can go get the shotgun out of my car, but you're not searching my car. So they go out to the car, and he gets the shotgun, and then he goes into my backseat. And I go, what are you doing? And he's like, just stand back there. And I was like, no, get out of my car. And he was like, I'm recovering our computer. I was like, you don't have a computer. I don't own a Raleigh police computer. And he's like, what is this right here? And I was like, that is my computer it's like a 1998, like tablet book, like a brick of a laptop that just has QuickBooks Pro on it. Right. And I was like, put my laptop down. And so he was like, this isn't yours. This is a department. I was like, it is not a department computer. Like, the department doesn't even own that brand of computer, brother. And so I ended up like flagging down a captain that was pulling into the parking lot. And I was like, dude, can you help me? And I was like, this dude is illegally searching my car right now. And they were like, like, I don't know what to do.
Wow.
And so they ended up going to get the captain of internal affairs. And he was like, okay, yeah, we're done. That's not, they opened up the computer only to find out that it was my personal computer. And, you know, and I was just like, why are you doing this? And the guy was like, why are you doing this? And I was like, dude, you have treated me like from day one. I don't even know you, my friend. And, yeah, that was it. And then he hid outside of my, distillery and took pictures of me going in and out. And, you know, after they told me to sign a paper that says I cannot go back to the distillery during the investigation. And I said, well, you're about to fire me.
Yeah.
And this is going to be my career. I cannot not go. And I said, I will let you know that I'm there, but I am going there every single day. Yeah. And he showed up to take pictures. And then I had to initial that they were the pictures of me, you know.
Wow. Eric, let me ask you this. How long did this process last?
Like 3 months.
Okay. So for 3 months, you just went through hell.
Every Tuesday I had to go back in. Now they took my gun and my badge. So I didn't have my gun and my badge that whole time. But every Tuesday, and it was like the games. It was like, be here at 1 o'clock, be here at 11 o'clock, and then they won't walk in until 1. You know, where you're just sitting in the lobby reading the book. You know, which is like, that's so mean. You know, from a guy who never took a sick day except when he broke his leg. I never called in sick.
Right.
They had to force me to use my comp time. I mean, I loved being a cop, and I was a morale builder. Every Sunday in the department, I barbecued for the squad out of my own pocket and money. Sometimes they would like put a donation thing out and people would put in dollars. Totally. But I would go and buy all the hamburgers and hot dogs or whatever. I would do something different every Sunday that we worked, which was like 2 Sundays a month. And oftentimes the homeless people would come by too, because they would know me, and I would throw them a free hot dog and hamburger. You know, so like morale was like my big thing. I always wanted to make people laugh and smile, and you know, they were just they were just screwing me over. And I thought it was just mean, and it wasn't, you know, it was not called for. I didn't do anything to warrant that. I didn't feel like it, at least.
No, if I may intervene, let me ask you this. It sounds to me that this is personal. It was a personal vendetta. Do you think this got personal as opposed to just the process?
Yeah. The guy, I never saw that guy in my whole career, and I had no idea who he was. And so I don't know how that was personal, but I just thought that like starting the conversation off with a knife hand in my face was extreme. Like, what if I did that on the street?
Right.
He would write me up. And so we had an inspections unit.
Right.
So not only did we have internal affairs, we also had to deal with inspections. And I was used to dealing with inspections, but I always passed my inspections. Like I would get attaboys for like, dude, we had to go back like 50 hours of body camera edit to catch you doing one cuss word. Great job.
Right.
But we still have to write you up for the one cuss word.
Right. So here's where I'm going with this. Why I mentioned it sounds to me like it's self-serving on the lieutenant's part, and by 100% we should hold the department accountable. However,
I think he was doing the work of the chief.
Okay, so it's the chief, command staff. Let's just say the department.
I think the chief.
The department pretty much had it out for you. That's the way I see it. They targeted you, and here we go. Because here's a question I have for you.
Yeah.
Knowing that there isn't policy as it relates to manufacturing, alcohol or this distill mill that you wanted to run and operate. Let's just say that it is a policy violation, or maybe it just doesn't reflect all that well. Right. What penalty would you give yourself?
Oh, I mean, if there was a policy violation and you sat me down as an internal affairs agent and you said, okay, Eric, here is the policy violation, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what they did. Well, I mean, later on, like in the towards the very, very end, when they were like just going over the fine tooth, the details over a fine tooth comb, they were like, there is a policy that says you can't manufacture. That policy was put into place after my investigation started.
Okay.
And there was a moodle. So like they updated the policy and they added manufacturing to it.
Correct.
So they're like, it is now a policy violation. I was like, okay, but you just added it. Like it wasn't there before. We already went through it and you've already done all of these rigmarole to me. And at the time, the union rep was like, do not submit to them. Like, do not. Like you're in the good. You're good here. So at the end, it was a little too late and they showed like, here's the policy violation. Are you still going to violate the policy, even though this is the policy now? And I said, yeah, I'm going to keep violating the policy. And they were like, okay. And you understand what that means? I was like, yeah, I understand that means you're going to, but if they would have done that at the very beginning, like if they would have sat me down day one and not knife handed me, they say like, look, man, like, here's what the chief thinks. The chief's like, it's not a good look. It's not going to work out. There's too much liability, which is what I thought they were going to say.
Okay.
And then I was going to say, can you give me 6 months? Take me off the line, put me in the crime reporting center where you do with all the losers. I'll go. I'll voluntarily go. Give me 6 months to get the business up and going, and I'll resign. Would that be fair? Or let me burn my 300 and something hours of sick.
Right. Totally.
Because I didn't burn those sick days. That's how I thought this was going to go down. And it never went down that way. It went down the hard way. And so, yeah, so then it became like a battle of the wills.
No, totally. And the point I'm trying to raise is that even though it's a department policy violation, does it merit
I don't
termination?
Think so.
That's my point. I mean,
personally, I don't think it merits being fired. No.
Right. And so it goes back to they had it out for you.
The chief did not want her accredited agency to be anywhere attached. They didn't have it out to me until it was the distillery. They did not want the distillery. They had no reason. There was no way to have it out for me. I had done nothing to anyone for them to be out. I was harmless. I wasn't fighting for political gain. I wasn't fighting for promotion.
Totally.
I mean, I was having dinner with lieutenants and captains because I was harmless.
Right.
Harmless. So I don't think that they just decided one day, oh, this Eric character, we don't like him. I think that they heard about it. I think the chief panicked.
Okay.
The chief is a 300+ pound woman of color who had made 5 arrests her entire career. Matter of fact, there's a long lineage of, she can't read. She's not intelligent. I don't mind saying that because I'm not trying to be mean, but it was embarrassing at my academy. I was the first graduating academy she spoke at. And my dad was like, man, are you sure you're good with being a police officer in a town where the chief of police can't even get through a graduation ceremony because she cannot read, And I was like, dude, that was terrible. Like, it's really bad. And I think she's the type that panics. And I think she pandered to the city manager because that's who appointed her
Correct.
in the city. So I think her whole career was based off of whatever the city manager wanted was what she was going to do. And I think she panicked. I think she was like, oh my God, one of our cops is going to own his own business and it's going to be a distillery. And she doesn't drink. She doesn't know anything about alcohol.
Got it.
Zero tolerance alcohol policy across the board in the department. And I think she was like, no, absolutely not. And he will, we will get him out of here. And that was when the nitpicking started that December. Cause I ended up getting fired like in August or September. But like in December was when they did a random body camera audit. And I pretty much passed the audit, except for one thing that they found while I was on the phone with my wife in a car by myself with my body camera going. I said, God, I hate people. I didn't swear. I didn't cuss. So they made me go to anger management for 5 weeks and work in the crime reporting center for 7 months. And that's when we knew they're trying to make you quit. Now, when I went to anger management, the anger management lady interviewed my wife and like my sergeant and a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
They ended up canceling the contract with the city because they were tired of the city using anger management as a punishment.
Yeah.
And not for people who have anger management. Because if there's one thing I don't have, it's anger issues.
Yeah, no, totally. 100%.
Not an angry person.
You're not. You're full of life. And I appreciate that.
So I knew then that like, that was, I think she was like, we're going to, and then when I didn't quit because of all that, then they were like, okay, we're going to get the city manager involved. And then I think that embarrassed her that I told the city manager I was going to go the firing route, even though I was very polite about it.
Yeah.
And I know that this is why I know that this is the evidence. The day they fired me at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I knew it was coming, but they brought me in and they said, officially if today, as of right now, you're terminated. That's fine. And I drove home. Well, at 4 o'clock, I got a call from the city. And I was like, and when I turned in my uniforms, I pressed them to turn them in. I ironed my uniforms. Even though they were pretty much already ironed, I went through and ironed and starched them just because I wanted to show that like, I have nothing against you guys. And I don't want to over the guys that have been so good to me, giving me extra handcuffs and handcuffs keys. And so the city called me and I was like, oh, like what could they possibly, like I turned everything in perfectly. And they were like, hey, Eric, we're just want to let you know that you're being nominated. You were nominated for a life-saving award on this date, and you're going to be receiving your life-saving award at the PNC Hurricanes Hockey Arena on such and such date. And I was like, I was just fired at 11 o'clock today. Are you sure? And they're like, we don't know anything about that, but we're just letting you know. So then I was like, a couple of weeks later, this ceremony happens. And this is where I knew it was crazy. This is where the story kind of gets crazier, but I'm sitting at the table with all my friends. I'm wearing my nicest suit, power tie, airborne wings, even my Raleigh Police, the little tiny little lapel pin that they give you on Christmas, and I got my kids with me. This is my first life-saving award, even because in the Southeast District, we didn't give life-saving awards. You didn't get one for life-saving awards because everybody would get like 1 million.
Yeah.
But I stopped some chick with a femoral bleed that was pregnant and it was a big story. And so they ended up giving me the life-saving award. So it was very special to me.
Good.
And while we're there, the press rep for the city, Sarah Rapp, comes up to my table and she says, in front of everybody, in front of my whole family, dude, she's like, I don't know what's going on, but I was just told I'm not allowed to take your picture today. And I was like, okay. And she's like, I don't know what's going on. They told me very specifically when you get your award to not take your picture. Wow. And she walks away. And I'm like, I've never spoken with that woman in my life. So I'm like, what? So I get up and I go to the PR cop, the captain. And I said, dude, what is going on? And he was like, Eric, I swear to God, I did not tell her that. That is like, I don't know where she got that information. Nobody, Eric, trust me, you've earned this award. We're here for you today. There's not going to be any shenanigans. Don't please go back to your table. And I was like, dude, seriously, like that was super embarrassing to come to my table and do that in front of me. Like, you guys have just And he was like, bro, I'm telling you, it's not me. That didn't happen. So I go back to my table. He comes back and he's like, can I talk to you? And he's just white as a ghost. And he's like, Eric, it came from the chief. I don't know. I don't know why, but the chief said, we cannot take your picture getting a life-saving board today. And I was like, what? So the press girl comes back to my table crying. She has tears in her eyes. She said, I've read your story. I've talked to everybody here. And there was another sergeant there. She's like, he's going to grab my camera and take the picture with my camera. And I was like, I don't want that to happen. I don't want him to get in trouble. She was like, well, he said he wants to do it. So when you get up there, just look at your sergeant and he's going to take your picture. And it was a very special moment for me, to get that picture taken. And I think ended up, my wife took the camera from the Sarge so the Sarge wouldn't get in trouble. Right. So I think my wife inevitably took that picture, but it was very cool that they did that. But that's how personal this was to them. And I never badmouthed them.
Yeah.
Never badmouthed them. So it was an unfortunate event, but that's kind of my take on internal affairs. It was in where our department was, there just wasn't guys screwing up. There wasn't, they were screwing up, but there wasn't nefarious. You know what I'm saying?
Totally. I think your story is beyond internal affairs. It's a leadership issue. It's just a self-serving issue, personal vendetta, just all the things that we don't want a department to be. And I would assume or speculate that even before your times, there must have been bad leadership before you got there in 2011, and certainly probably now. I'm hoping, and I beg to ask, have things gotten any better? I mean, you've been away since 2018 from the department.
Yeah, the chief resigned, or not resigned, but the chief retired, and they got a new chief there, and they've changed the uniforms. They gave the cops really good body armor, and morale actually went way up after the chief exited. But it was her time to go. I mean, crime was up. Last I checked, when I was writing my book, it was up 22%. Violent crime was up 23%. It's like, how do you take over? And then, in 4 years, you're 22% worse than you were. Yeah. But, this was prior to George Floyd.
Right.
It was up 22%. Yeah. And, and the new chief, but, I don't know how internal affairs has ever changed. And I guess my big thing with internal affairs is I understand the need for internal affairs. I absolutely do. I don't know that if you're going to hire professionals and you're going to be so strict, we were the highest graduating class. We graduated with 26, I think.
Okay.
We went from 56 to 26. I mean, I remember coming out of special operations, our academy was so hard. And if you're going to hold everybody to this crazy standard, I mean, they're all up in your business. I mean, you don't get time off. You can't fart in that department without them smelling it and knowing what you had for dinner. I mean, everybody was physically fit for the most part, except for the chief. Our homicide department was just world class, and SWAT team is world class. And you're gonna hire those people that much. Why do you need them to be so afraid of internal affairs? What is the problem with saying, here's what you did wrong? Here's how it needs to be fixed. And we have to give you this punitive paperwork. It has to happen because of lawyers and legal issues and everything like that. You understand, correct, Mr. Tansey? You understand why we have to get, but at the end of the day, keep doing what you're doing. That would be better than how they do it, where it's just complete fear mongering. Like, well, we don't know what the consequences are going to be for this.
Yeah.
We'll let you know. And then you sit for 3 months, downing a case of Tums, only
it goes without saying that in your moments of darkness, no one's really there for you. I always say, and I'll continue to say, that the punishment is not the penalty. The punishment is the process. And you are certain one of those situations and incidents where you were just treated like and there's no need for that. I think we kind of covered this specific type of allegation, which turned out to be a UBC and unbecoming conduct with some policy violations. However, does that really merit termination? We both agreed no. I'm 100% with you that we need to hold the department accountable for what they did, and I hope there's lessons learned. I hope that they actually listen to this. You never know. There might be a young Eric Tansey who not necessarily wants to start a distillery business, but any off-duty type of business, and just hope that they don't get treated the way you did. And I appreciate you sharing that with me. Let me ask you this: worst incident in your career that you can share with us?
Well, the worst incident. I mean, I had a lot of bad incidents.
Right.
I don't know the worst one.
Yeah. Which one sticks out the most in your career?
Like that involves internal affairs?
No, just in your career, man. Just I want to know worst.
Okay,
Yeah,
my worst day of my life, like the worst day of my career.
Something like that. Yes.
So I got a call again. This was like towards the end of my career too, like my fifth or sixth year. So I'm a pretty seasoned cop at this point, and a shooting goes out. Some Hispanics, and I worked about a shooting or stabbing every night, so it's not that big of a deal. We go to these pretty routinely. And so, I mean, I'm like within 10, 15 seconds of this shooting, and I didn't hear it. So they call it out, and I'm like 3 blocks over, and I'm like, hey, Riley, I'm headed that way, but I really didn't hear it. And I'm the kind of cop that has my window down and volume low, but so I thought this was going to be kind of BS. And I get there, there's a Hispanic just bleeding profusely from the skull, yelling in Spanish or whatever, and there's a dead Mexican guy underneath of him, and then there's another one to the side that's holding a stomach wound, and so I'm trying to communicate with this dude that's bleeding from the head, and I have no idea what's going on, and he's saying pistola, 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 pistola. So I'm like, okay, well, he got cracked in the head by a pistola, and I look down and I see a bullet hole in the face of the deceased that was laying underneath the tailgate. And then this other guy off to the side with the gunshot wound. So I call in, tell Riley that I need, ambulance pretty quickly, and I need some Spanish speaking officers doing things. So I get down by the one that's got the gut wound. He's got his hand, covering his stomach, and the blood's coming out of his fingers and all the things, and man, he just looked at me with these like very questionable eyes, like, and he was panicking. He would arch his back to try to catch a breath,
right?
But he was looking at me like with 1,000 questions in his eyes, but he couldn't speak, right? So he's, I don't know what he was asking, but it was probably like, what happened? Why am I, what's going on? And we locked eyes, and he was trying to breathe, and I'm like, hey, dude, like, it's gonna be okay, like, hold on. And so I move his hands over, and his hands just kind of flop down, and I put the pressure on his stomach, and I'm just looking at me, and it was like the whole world stopped that night. And I worked a lot of shootings, so like this wouldn't be the first guy that's died, but this was the worst one. So he's arching his back, just really trying to shoulder blades back, trying to catch his breath, and he's panicking, but he's looking at me the whole time like, do something, like, I can't breathe, and there's nothing I can do except wait. And I'm like, hey man, the ambulance is coming, and I'm just trying to be okay. And then, he takes his last breath with me, and I slap him in the face. And I remember feeling something very warm on my wrist and my hands. And I looked down, and blood was draining into my glove because it had pulled up. I'd put the weight down on the belly, and it formed like a pool of blood, and it was starting to run down the sleeve of my, my glove. And so he takes his last breath, and I knew it was his last breath, and I don't know. I've done CPR many times. I just knew this one was different. Like, I just knew that this guy was dead, and it just kind of took the life out of me. And so the ambulance guy, as I'm watching this happen, he shoulder chucks me out of the way, and he just starts banging on this guy's chest. And we get to the hospital, and the radio had blown up. There was another shooting, and da-da-da. So we're at the hospital. He's dead. He was dead on the ambulance. And Sarge calls me, and he says, hey, I've got like 2 more of these. You stay there. The doc's going to run through it. You got to tell the family when they get there, and then just stay with the family. You can do it. Like, I've had it, just be empathetic and do your thing. And I was like, yeah, I got you, Sarge. Like, I'll take care of it. So we hang up the phone, and I'm waiting. And the doctor comes over. He's like, we're just waiting for the chaplain, but the family's in this room over here, and we're going to tell them. And he was like, are you the one going to tell them? And I was like, I'm going to tell them. And he was like, well, typically it's whoever was there when he died. It wasn't us. And he's like, we'll be there to like explain what he died from, but your job to tell them that he's dead. He's like, or I can do it. And I was like, oh, I would much prefer you did it if it's an option. And he was like, okay. So the chaplain gets there. We walk in the room and he's like, ma'am, whatever, your son was shot tonight and he died before arriving at the hospital. And then he bailed. Like he said it like stoically, turned and walked out. And this woman, and there was like a Spanish interpreter. She does like a little bit of interpreting. And it's this beautiful Spanish girl, probably like 28, makeup done. Now this is like 2 a.m, 1 a.m. at this point. Maybe not that late. Maybe it's like midnight, but makeup done, hair beautifully done, wearing a dress. She looked nice. Falls out over the ground, grabs my ankles. The woman who's older, which I'm guessing was his mom or maybe a grandmother or something, she slumps back into the chair, doesn't really say much. And the woman just cries. And I just stand there. And I'm just standing there. She's crying at my feet. I'm just standing there. I don't really know what to do. And so finally the priest was like, consoling the older woman, and the girl that was on her knees crying at my feet, yelling at me in yelling in Spanish, weeping, I don't know how long it lasted, but it was a while. And I finally got a chance and I went and just sat down and, I sat, how a cop does, right? Like straight back. And she got up over top of me, yelling at me in Spanish. And I was like a wounded dog. And I was just looking down like at her waistline. I don't know what she was yelling at me, but it wasn't nice. And she started punching me like in the shoulder and it hurt, it winced. And I was like, just take it. She hit me again. I was like, fuck, man. She hit me again. And then the mom came over and like pushed her kind of back. And I just sat there. I didn't move. And then she was like yelling at me. I'm trying not to cry. And it's like, the flood of tears that catches you like right at the bridge of your nose. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, if that goes, I'm dead. Like I'll be sobbing. So I'm just staring at the floor, probably like an asshole, just trying not to, and she's yelling at me. And I'm just trying not to cry. And then she comes over and she like tries to hit me again, but she kind of like deflects off my shoulder and I kind of like catch her. And then she like gets right in front of my face. And it was just awful, man. It was awful. And she cries and we hug. And I try to like hug her, but I don't know what to do. And I see the blood all over my palm.
Wow, man.
And I start to freak out because I'm like, what if she sees this blood on my hand? I forgot that the blood had went down into my, now I'm like hyper focused on like not hugging her and trying to get the blood. And all I can think about is like the blood on my hands, and she's crying. And it's lasted forever, man. It just went on. And so I finally, other family showed up and I snuck away hours later, and I got to the locker room, man, and the other squad was coming in and they were like, I was late, obviously, getting out. And the other squad was in there changing, and they were like, dude, long night last night. And I was like, yeah, dude. And they were like, hey, bro, heard some Mexican got stuffed in the guts last night. And I was like, yeah, he did. And he was like, man, did he die? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, man, I heard it was over with some black kids that just got off of work, and or some black kids that were milling around, and these Mexicans, they were doing an overnight drywall job, and they just gotten paid, and they schwacked those dudes over $200. I was like, yeah, I didn't know anything about it, man. I was at the hospital, and all I wanted to do was like just get the out of the locker room. And I got in my car, dude, and I cried and I cried and I cried.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
That's good.
The hardest and the best part of doing this podcast is stories like this just don't get shared. And, people don't know how tragic accidents or incidents that we experience, how it affects us. So I really appreciate.
It's just wild, it's just like it was just different. I don't know. It was like the way the guy looked at me.
Of course. Well, hey, Eric, I'd be the first one to tell you, look, I've done 24 years, and in my time in the streets, I've never really held someone where they're dying last breath, eye to eye, and and then I thought the story was done there, but what you experience and to know, the worst that God has to offer in this world and what we go through is just amazing. Amazing in a sense that people don't understand what officers go through. And you know what? Believe what you want to believe. Call us what we are and what we're not. But at the end of the day, you got to call 911, and here we are. You have these stories. So I thank you so much for sharing this. And, you know, sorry to bring you back to something.
That was like the worst. It's probably still like bucket list, like one of the worst days of my life.
Yeah, no, totally.
And then you go home, you cry. Like I cried in the parking lot and just sobbed in my car. No, like nobody saw me, obviously. And then I drove home, and it was time for bed. And my wife didn't hear that story until years later.
Yeah,
years later when I was writing my book, and I had put that in the chapter. It's chapter 15, and she read that, and she was like, "Man, why did you never tell me that?" She's like, "I was bawling my eyes out. Like, why did you not tell me that story?" And I was like, I just didn't want to tell that story ever again. It's like, that's just a story I just, because it was so senseless. Yeah. This guy went to work and maybe he was freshly married. That's what I get, because she was fingering this ring the whole time.
Yeah, no, totally.
And while she was crying, and so it's like, in my brain, it was like, here's this guy is like probably freshly married, young 20s, working an overnight drywall job, sitting on their tailgate, cracking some Coronas at the end of the, end of the night, the end of the job. They got their $200 in cash, and his whole life was just gone right then and there. And there was no planning. It's not like cancer, right? Where you can kind of get to place, and totally. This guy's just like laying on the floor of a part of town, just staring at my white Pringo ass that doesn't know what he's saying. He's probably like, damn, like couldn't get a Spanish speaking dude here, Wow. So that was like, for me, for whatever reason, that was the one that just never really went away from me.
Yeah, no, totally. Hey man, I appreciate all that. Hey man, let's conclude on a good note. Look, I'll leave the floor up to you. Any advice you have for anybody who wants to come on the job in law enforcement, and the challenges that we face today?
Yeah, I think what I tell all my rookies is, be the first person to stand up, the last person to sit down. If you're the first person to stand up, you can help other people get up. If you're the last one to sit down, the person that sat down before you that didn't get the water or didn't get the food that needs you while you're still up, just go through the beginning of your career, just being that guy, the guy that everybody kind of needs. Like, hey, while you're up, can you grab me some water? Hey, while you're up, can you grab me that bag? And then know that the call is not necessarily like this big gunfight, life-saving battle. The call is that tire that you change on the side of the road. That call is, helping a woman push the grocery cart out of the way. And if I ever catch my rookies putting the blinders on, the fake blinders, I don't see the car on the side of the road.
Right.
That's where you piss me off, because that's your job. Your job's not running and gunning. Your job, that's fun. That's a cool part of the job. But the biggest part of your job, the way you can really change somebody's life, is changing that tire on the side of the road. It's that simple. It's 150 degrees outside. You don't want to do it. Like that guy doesn't want to do it. You get out and you do it. And you change somebody's life for the better. Giving somebody a ticket doesn't really change their life. Chasing a bad guy doesn't really change that bad guy. Like, he's going to hate you no matter what. But you can really change somebody's day and their perception of police by just getting up and doing that service part. So that's my only advice. Yeah.
Brother, thank you so much for sharing everything. I truly 100% appreciate it, man. We're going to wrap it up, and
thanks.
You and I we'll meet soon, bro. Okay. And on that note, please be safe out there, and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.